All right, you should be on slide 5 now. So here's how this works. You're going to be given a phrase. I'm going to walk you through it because we haven't done this yet. You're going to be given a phrase from the story, and you're going to be asked to look at the boxes below, highlight which one is the correct answer, okay? So, what is this phrase? You should not be such a turtle. This is what Elaine Ben's mom used to say to him, okay? Now, does she mean he actually shouldn't be a turtle? Of course not. But what does she mean by the phrase above? Is this a hyperbole, metaphor, alliteration, imagery, onomatopoeia, idiom, simile, personification, or connotative language? All right, you shouldn't be such a turtle. What is being compared here? Ben is being compared to a what? A turtle. Are we using like or as? No. Ben is directly being compared to a turtle. We know that a direct comparison of two unlike things is a metaphor. I want you to highlight the metaphor or the word metaphor. I don't care what color you use as long as I can read it. It says you'll use all of these only once. We will not use one of them, but I'll walk you through it, okay? All right, now, like I said before, in 5th grade, they don't care if you know, what is this? And they're not going to ask you that. This is just a review. Instead, they're going to ask you, what does the author mean by this use or his use of the metaphor on page 26? And it will have this phrase highlighted, okay? Now, what does she mean by that? What? You shouldn't be such a turtle. What did Elaine, his mom, mean by that? He shouldn't just stick to himself. He should get out of his comfort zone a little bit. Get out of his shell. Stick his head out of his shell and go and make some friends. All right, slide 6. Lightning kept flashing, momentarily illuminating the room like flashbulbs on a camera. What's being compared here? The room being illuminated like flashbulbs on a camera. Are we using like or as? Yes, we are. Therefore, it's not a metaphor, it's a simile. With charts, if you have to highlight or do anything like that, you might have to click on it a few times, okay? Slide 7. Ben heard the wind and the clacking of the boats on the water, the musical chirp of bird calls, footsteps crunching throughout the snow, and the distant sound of human voices. This is his dream he was having after he was declared deaf. Now, here's why I said this. I'm going to tell you so far that it's imagery. Let's highlight it, and then let's do some backwards thinking with this. Knowing the answer, I'm going to tell you why I told you in the Quizlet video why we choose imagery last, okay? All right, Ben heard the wind and the clacking of the boats. What is clacking? Onomatopoeia, sound words, right? The musical chirp of birds call. We could consider that to be a little bit personified. Musical chirp, musical, even though birds make sounds and music, it's not necessarily what they do. Crunching could be considered to be a sound word, onomatopoeia, through the snow and the distant sound of human voices. Now, we can find a few examples of the other topics or the other figurative language pieces in here. But overall, the author is trying to paint a picture in your mind of the setting of the story, the setting of his dream, okay? Always choose imagery last. If you have a circumstance like this where you're using one of each, and you know you've already used metaphor, you've already used personification, I would definitely use imagery. Or you can skip it, come back to it once you've used the rest of them, because imagery is really involved in every fiction story that we read, all right? All right, slide 8. Another crack of thunder shook the house. Which one's that one? That one's pretty easy. That one is onomatopoeia, onomatopoeia. All right. Sound word. Slide 9. One glowing window beckoned, staring back through the darkness like an unblinking eye. Now, we do have like here, okay? We do have like. So we know there is a comparison, all right? But let's think about it. One glowing window, we're talking about a window, beckoned, which means called to someone, kind of made them come to it. Staring back through the darkness like an unblinking eye. The window is staring. out into the darkness or through the darkness, calling people to look into it. Yes, this is a simile, like an unblinking eye. We're comparing the window to an unblinking eye, but let's think about it. If we're comparing a window to an unblinking eye, do windows beckon people? Do they call them? Do they stare? Do they have eyes to stare with in the first place? No. So the window is given human-like characteristics. So it's more personification. Is there a simile in there? Yes, of course. But the author's not going to ask you how many pieces of figurative language are in this statement. They're going to ask you, what does the author mean by this statement right here? Just means that the window made people want to look into it. That's it. All right? All right, slide 10. The city was still burning hot. Was the city really burning? We haven't gotten to this part yet. I mean, obviously it's 490, page 490, so we've got a ways to go. But it's in the middle of the summertime. I'll tell you that. That's all I'm going to give you, so there's no spoilers. So if I'm saying the city is burning hot, is it actually on fire? No, it's not. It's just really, really hot, which is an exaggeration. It's hyperbole. All right. Whoops. All right. And the last one, we've got two choices. Choosing to use the word home over house implies to the reader that the character has an attachment to the place they are referring to. This is the only thing that I didn't have a slide for in your Quizlet. It's not alliteration because we don't see the same beginning sounds repeated. This is what we just are going to call, in general, connotative language. I'm going to highlight that. Let me explain what I mean by that. Connotative language just means the author's choosing to phrase it in a specific way that might not be or fall underneath any of the classifications of a hyperbole, a metaphor, onomatopoeia, but is using that phrase to make the readers feel a certain way or understand a certain thing, okay? As we get going with figurative language, we're going to talk about tone. Tone is the feeling that words give you. You can have a tone that's positive, meaning it makes the reader feel good. A tone that's negative, meaning it's meant to make the reader feel bad, or a neutral tone, which doesn't really fall into either category and isn't used for that purpose, okay? So that's kind of what I mean by connotative language right now. Connotative means in the context of what you're reading. In the circumstance where Janet's in his house and she said, let's go home. She's talking about going to her house, right? And he says, I am home. He's talking about the fact that he's in his house. Now, he could say, I'm in my house, right? But that doesn't really give the reader the feeling that Ben wants to stay in that house because home is where he feels the most at home, right? Now, does he actually live there anymore? No, he's living with his aunt, uncle, and his two cousins in their house, right? But it's not really his home. Where he is in the house, in his own house when he catches Janet, is really his home. So the author uses the word home instead of house to make the reader understand that the character is attached to that specific place. You've probably heard the idiom, home is where the heart is, right? We just know that saying, home is where the heart is, means wherever you feel the most comfortable, and usually it's with your family, is where you feel like you're at home. In this circumstance, his house is where he feels like home, but he doesn't live there anymore. That's why the author used the word home instead of house, okay? So that's our review and our connection so far. This is the beginning of the week on Tuesday this week since we had Monday off. So you were introduced to what the words were. You already know what they are, the figurative language terms of hyperbole, imagery, simile, metaphor. That is taught to you in third grade. You may have even gotten it earlier. This is just a review. And I used phrases from the passages that we've read in Wonderstruck so far to connect to the definitions. That is not where we're going to stay. Tomorrow, as we continue, after we do our phonics and spelling, we're going to look farther into what these different phrases actually mean, and I'll give you more from the book Wonderstruck, and I'll pull in other examples from books that we may have read as 4th and 5th graders, okay? I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.